Welcome to the Myofascial Health Podcast, hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' myofascial release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my myofascial release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health Podcast. Now, I'm joined here today by a very special guest. She's an MFR therapist, a physical therapist, a wife, a mother, very outdoorsy. It's my honor to introduce Mya Swan. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we just got done taking Fascial Pelvis, taught by Joan Miller. Shout out, Joan. And it was a great class. It's great to see someone like you who's an instructor taking these classes as a student. What prompted you to take this class?
Well, your podcast. So actually, I usually am assisting with classes, and I had to not assist as much as I typically do this year in February and March. And so, of course, I was missing the work. And I listened to your podcast and heard Joan say that she was going to be here. And I was like, oh, Joan's going to be there. I haven't taken fascial pelvis from Joan. Why don't I do that? I just was assisting Rob in Tempe for fascial pelvis in November, and Joan participated in that class as a student. And so I just thought it would be great to learn from her. I assisted John and Rob many times. I can't remember if I've assisted Donna with that class yet or not, but I have repeated and assisted the class many times, but never with Joan. So I thought it would be good to learn from somebody different.
I completely agree. This is my third time retaking fascial pelvis. And again, if you have the opportunity, you should repeat. It's half off. And it was interesting to learn this material taught by Joan because I feel like I have kind of the outlines of the picture, and I was able to color in some of the details that I didn't really take the time to look for, or maybe I was impatient or just rushed the process a little bit. One thing that I really appreciated, especially in this class, getting to work with someone like you, is I remember, part of me is still this MFR snob where I come to seminars and I'm like, yo, let's work it together because I want the treatment. But it's about learning how to do the techniques, right? This is here just for us to learn. This is not technically the treatment, Oftentimes we learn things quicker here. We don't hold it for as long as we should. It's at least 5 minutes. That time component is what makes Myofascial Release by John what it is. It's that gentle, sustained hold that a lot of things don't really talk about. Now, I appreciated Joan's perspective because she is a PT. And she is very technical. This class is very technical. You're looking at the bones and using them as handles. And I think if you're not too familiar with the landmarks, it can be a little bit overwhelming. And it's cool to be where I'm at now, where I know the work enough. And then so when someone is maybe a little bit overwhelmed, like they're an occupational therapist, they don't know about the pelvis, I have enough experience now to kind of pass along the torch and share it with others. What do you notice that was different between Joan's teaching and, let's say, John or Rob? What would you say?
Oh my goodness. Well, I am very short, and so I learned so much from Joan as far as the ways that she adapts the techniques, because like I said, I learned from John and Rob, and they are much taller than me. So a lot of the techniques I have adapted on my own, but when I take the courses, I always want to stay true to whatever the instructor is teaching. So in this case, it was very valuable and awesome to me because the instructor, there's very few people shorter than me in life, but Joan is one of them. And so I was super stoked to try out some of the ways that she's adapted things. I knew, like, every time I take a class, even if it was from John, assisted him multiple times, I always learned more from John every time because I'm in a different place. I'm hearing it in a different way. I'm just picking up. There's just so much, even though it might be the same techniques, he would go with the energy of the class. So he would answer the questions of the class. And so I knew that I was going to learn from Joan. I knew that this would be well worth my time and investment. However, I wasn't prepared for how much. Every technique I learned something new that I now can immediately go back and take to my practice. Another thing that is interesting to me is I think that there's this thing where other PTs maybe aren't as accepting of this work. And I was just thinking about how I think some of their lack of acceptance is exactly where I was when I started out, where I was like, I graduated from PT school. I was like, I don't do orifices and I don't do woo-woo. So definitely no women's health, nothing that is like out of the norm. I'm very scientific minded. And so it's kind of funny to me that I even followed this path of taking one of John's classes. But when you take a class like fascial pelvis, like it is all about the structure, the technique. Like it is a very just full of so much PT information that I just feel like if more PTs would just give this a chance, they would realize that it might be something different than what they expect. Or maybe they're hearing things about this work that maybe isn't true and they're taking it at face value of whatever that person said instead of experiencing it themselves. So like if you've never had cheesecake before and somebody goes on and on about how disgusting it is and you should never try it and whatever, but then your perception of it is different, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I wish that maybe someone listening to this might be a PT and super skeptical, as I was when I first started, but they might give it a try and they might find that this work is pretty freaking amazing and well worth checking out just to see.
Absolutely. You're in good company, because when I first got introduced to the work, I was very skeptical. So this person that you're describing is literally who I was, where, come from a doctor of physical therapy background. There's a lot of emphasis on evidence-based practice. And then you come to this seminar and it's very different. Like, you pack your own massage table. I never took a class where you had to bring your own massage table. And this class, Fascial Pelvis, I think is a good introductory class to allow that stepping stone for those PTs. Because just like you said, it's a little bit more structural. And it's mentioned, like the fascia holds the consciousness, emotions, and things like that. But we don't go into the detail of feeling that and holding the holds for as long as when John would teach it. And I think when John would teach it, well, at least when I took it in his latter days, he would just rip the Band-Aid off and say, hey, this is what it is. And I know that for me, it kind of cut against the grain, right? Because it's like, hey, I spent all this money and invested in my education and learned this thing, and now you're saying it's not valid. And it's not to say it's not valid. Something that Joan mentioned that I really appreciated for anyone who's curious is this isn't to replace what you're doing, it's to add to it. And I think sometimes when you're feeling pretty confident, overconfident, and you think you have the best thing, you kind of put it out there like, hey, you got to do this because it's the better thing. But what I've learned is it's kind of like when you're around kids and they have their favorite teddy bear. If you take it away from them, they're not going to like that, right? They're going to fuss about it. And so what you have to do is just let them hold their teddy bear, but educate them on what there's possibilities for. And I think one thing that John had said was, without awareness, there's no choice. And so for me, I wasn't aware of how the energetic component facilitates the healing process. But then when I saw it, and when John taught on stage, there were kind of big unwindings. And that made me a little bit scared. I don't know. It was very odd to me. And to know that, hey, that's totally normal. Unwinding is a totally normal and necessary part of the healing process, but I was never exposed to it. The first time you took your class, what was your experience?
So I had a very interesting journey, and I think that the only way for my type A plus PT brain to be like cracked open was in this particular way. So a lot of times people find this work because they had some kind of injury that like cracks them open. I did not have that. I had all my stuff come later, luckily, after finding this work. So fresh out of school, so I graduated in 2002 and I got my first job in Illinois. And I was very lucky that it was a practice where I was able to treat patients one-on-one for an hour. I was working at this clinic, so I think there were probably like 5 other therapists there. And this other therapist had a patient who I never treated, but I would see her come and go from her sessions. She was a very high-level executive, very professional. And one day, after she'd been coming for a while, the owner of the clinic said, I want to have some other people come in and assist. And so this patient was on the table, the owner of the clinic was there, her primary therapist was there, I was there, at least one other therapist, and she basically had her lay on the table and was like, just hold her arm, take gravity out, and if movement comes, just go with it. I had never heard of anything like this before. So I just did what I was told. And this woman she started to move. And so I just took gravity out and we went with it. And she went off the table and her body simulated a fall down the stairs, which I didn't know that was part of her history. This very stoic professional woman went into this huge emotional release. So this was a long time ago, so I don't remember if she screamed, but for sure she cried and she went into stuff. And I remember thinking, what is this? Like, this isn't a person that's gonna like fake something. Like, what is this? And so afterwards, I remember asking the owner of the clinic, what was that? And she basically, if my memory serves me right, was like, I don't do that very often and I really don't want to talk about it, and then left. And I was like, what is that? And so at some point, someone must have said the word unwinding. So fast forward, I end up having my son, having my daughter. Right after having my son, moving back to Phoenix, had my daughter, and then I needed to take continuing ed courses. So even though I wasn't working, I needed to stay up on my Con Ed. So I went to a seminar, and it was not easy. My baby was still breastfeeding, so it was, not to go into too much detail, but like having to pump breast milk at the breaks, so that like it was a big deal for me to be away from her and have to do all the things you have to do when you're a new mom. So I was at this course, and the instructor was a very well-known PT, and he's published books, and he's very well-known. And he was explaining something, but he was explaining it from the nervous system perspective. And he came over and he put his hand on my head, and he was like, do you feel that? And I said, what? And he said, movement. And I was like, I feel gravity. Like, I feel like if someone I feel movement, like from the gravity, from the pressure or whatever. And then he walked away. What he was describing to the class was talking about movement. And so it sounded like unwinding, or what I had seen before, but I didn't really know what that even was. But the word unwinding was in my head. So at a break, I asked him, is what you're describing unwinding? And he unleashed on me. He went off and started talking about this John Barnes guy and all this stuff. And then he said, because I have a talent of asking the wrong question at the wrong time to the wrong person, apparently. And so he said, when class comes back, ask me that again. And I was like, oh, perfect. That's going to be fun. So class came back, and then he had me ask my question again, and I did. And then he unleashed on me again, and basically was saying, like, stay away from this John Barnes and stay away from this work and all the reasons that this is not scientific and whatever. And he gave a website to go research it. So when I was driving home from that course after, spending the weekend, I was thinking, what did I learn that I could use in practice? And the answer was nothing. Like, I really didn't leave that class feeling like I learned anything that I could use. And so when I got home, when I was able, raising 2 young children, I Googled the website, and it was all these people like just bashing on John Barnes and myofascial release. And I just thought about it, and I was like, he had such a visceral reaction to the question, and I learned nothing that I could use from him. I wonder who this John Barnes guy is. So then I researched John Barnes just a little bit, and then as my children grew, I got back into working, and I was working at a clinic, and one of the therapists went and took a John Barnes class, came back, and she was like, oh, you would love this. You have got to try this, which to me is funny because I am very conservative, scientific, type A plus. And part of why I think I probably have stayed away from John's work is, he's got the brochures where he's in Sedona and he's wearing all the turquoise and he's got the long hair. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so. But she came back and was like, you should really go check that out. And I was at a clinic, they paid for my continuing ed. It's nice to take a break from your children sometimes when you're a mother. And so I was like, hey, I'll go see what this is. But it was mainly because the guy had such a strong reaction in the negative, right? And so I went, and when I was taking the class, I saw someone unwind. And I still to this day don't know if it was true or if they were faking. Now I can tell, but that was my first experience. And I was like, okay, so she's moving and she's going off the table, but what is this? Is this real? And so I was super, super skeptical. I probably wanted to not believe it, but I was like, I'm just going to stay with this and see. I'm just going to see where this goes. And so at a break, I asked John a question about the diaphragm. And he said, do you want to be the model for the next technique? And I was thinking, no, because this is a huge class. There's probably 75 to 100 people. I don't remember. I don't want to go get in front of 75 people in shorts and a sports bra. I just don't. But I said, yes, I will be the model. So I came up on stage, and I, had to take off my t-shirt to be in a sports bra and shorts, which normally is the most mortifying thing I could ever imagine. But just being around John, I just felt like it's okay. There was just this sense of peace and calm, and it was the audience didn't exist. I just was present with him. So I laid on the table, and he did the transverse plane on my diaphragm. And you're totally there. It's not like you're checked out or hypnotized or something. So I'm feeling, and with time, as he's explaining, first I just felt this sense of safety and calm and peace. And then I started to feel my body move a little bit. And I was like, dang, he is a good PT. He must be really good at it or something. He's good. It doesn't really feel like it's me moving, but it doesn't really feel like it's him moving me, but it has to be him, right? And so then I kind of gave it time, and then all of a sudden my eyes started doing REM. They're my eyeballs are moving, and I close my eyes, and there's all this fluttering. And I'm just laying there thinking, he can't do that, and I'm not doing that. What is this stuff? And so after that, we went and paired up, and I worked on that person, and I was feeling things that I had never felt before when connected to another person. So this person was a stranger, and I was feeling emotions that I knew were not mine. So I was like, what in the heck is this? And so I didn't just feel like I dove right into it. I still was I'm feeling that, but what is this? And then that night, I slept, woke up, and I was in this almost kind of a foggy state. And I realized this pain that I had in my hips that I never told anybody about, because why would I complain about this pain? It's not a big deal. People are worse than me, all of the things. It was gone. Then the next day we did the techniques, and then I realized the jaw pain and tension that I've been carrying probably my whole life was gone. So for me, it was undeniable things that I felt in my own body. I had to experience it myself in order to know. If I sat for a 3 or 4 day class and I just watched other people unwind, there's no way I would have continued the work. But I felt changes in my body that I couldn't deny. So when I drove home from that course, it was all I could think of. So from Sedona to Phoenix, I was just driving thinking about all of the people that I could potentially help with this work. So it was the complete opposite of what I felt before. I was talking to my mother along the way, and just so excited about this work. And honestly, having my doctorate in physical therapy, it took me 5 years to do my undergrad because of lots of things. And then, the DPT is another 3. I was in school for 8 years, and that's a lot of money, probably more now, but it was a huge investment to something that I didn't know for sure if I was even gonna like it, right? And so it's a huge time commitment, financial commitment, all of the things. When I graduated with my doctorate, I wasn't like, oh, like I found my purpose. When I left John's first class that I ever took, I found my purpose. I was like, this is it.
Wow,
Yeah.
I can resonate with so many parts of your story. When I first took the leap, I remember I was working for an insurance-based clinic, getting burnt out, and I had always wanted to learn more about myofascial release, but I didn't know who I wanted to learn it from. And I hear about John Barnes myofascial release on a podcast of all places. And I say, maybe this is the guy. So I look it up, and lo and behold, he's teaching a vacation series in Austin a month away. And I'm like, the stars are aligning. And when I asked my boss at the time, hey, can I take this course? I'll take time off without pay. I'll pay for it myself. And you'll have this technique to introduce to your clinic. I thought that was a no-brainer. But to my surprise, he said no. And I was like, I couldn't believe this. And so I remember being really stressed out and anxious because I was like, I want to take this course, but am I really going to quit my job to take it? And so those 2 weeks were anxious filled, and ultimately I had to think to myself, how much have I learned in the past 3 months? How much was it because of my own desire to learn more? How much was it because of the actual clinic teaching me? And I realized it was just that I enjoyed learning and I was pursuing these paths on my own. So I quit my job to take my first seminar. And I'll just say that Austin, we have a slogan, and it's keep Austin weird. And so when you have a class full of licensed massage therapists in Austin, there is a weirdish energy. And so I remember walking in, and again, I had no idea about bringing your own massage table and all these things. And then here's John teaching. And I remember just being so out of place, But I remember him being like, I remember seeing him and knowing that he was a PT. And I was like, okay, if he's a PT, I'm a PT. There's some common ground. Let me see what this is about. And then you have your own experience. And I'll say the experience that I felt, just kind of like what you said, just knowing the path is different than walking the path. And when you say that, you could see these things, but it's not until you felt them on your own that you now had a validation for the experience. That is kind of what you need, because it's like riding a bike. You can't learn it by just reading a book about it. You actually have to do it and feel it, how to balance, look both ways, and pedal, and then right? And I'll just say that I remember working in my job, and my grandmother had passed, who I was very close with, and I never got the space to grieve. And I think in our culture, American culture, it's like you just keep on the grind, keep working, so you don't really pause and feel those things. And so when I took my first vacation series, I remember we were laying on the ground. I forget the opera music that was playing, but I think John had said, everybody loses somebody in life. And it was this powerful experience where my jaw started to quiver and I let out some tears. And I was like, okay, that wasn't just me making that up. And, you say, John saw something special in you and picked you. I had to ask him. I mustered up enough courage because I was like, is this unwinding thing real? And the unwinding, for anyone who's unfamiliar with this work, it's this natural, involuntary movement. It has a very specific quality to it versus a conscious movement. And I remember getting on stage, and John was masterfully using his energy and his presence to facilitate the technique. And I remember describing as, it feels like my arms and legs were like kites, and the string was tethered to my abdomen where John was kind of holding and just letting them float. Something I think that you mentioned is super important is that you felt very safe and protected. What was your word? Sorry, you said.
I don't remember. Just like this sense of peace and calm.
Safety.
Yeah. And one of the things, honestly, that when I first felt such dramatic changes, and this was so different than anything that I'd ever felt before, honestly, I'm not a religious person, but I'm very spiritual.
Okay.
And one of the first things was like, what is this, like, where is God in this? Like, is this something that I should be even doing? Like, where? It's so profound. I've always felt very protected by God. And so I felt like I'm going to just keep like testing this. And if it goes against my belief systems, or if it ever doesn't feel right, I'm out. I'm like, I'm good at, like, I'll just jump, right? I'm just out. And I never felt that. I always felt like this was never something that was to be feared or negative or anything. And I remember reading his book for the first time, Healing Ancient Wounds, and in there basically was like, God is the ocean and each of us are the drops of water. And I just was like, whew, okay, this man at least believes in God. Like, who knows what the details, but like, he's mentioning it in his book. And so for me, I also feel like this was a way for me to hear. So like for me, I had spent a lifetime of talking to God, but no one ever taught me to listen to God.
Yeah.
And so I felt when I'm in that space of being quiet, I could not believe how much information and wisdom I was able to hear. And to me, whether you believe in God or not, or the universe or higher power or whatever that word is, I feel like this work helped me to get in touch with that quiet place that you have to be in order to receive. So to receive information, messages, love, whatever it is. And so to me, what an amazing gift. So I just continued to take classes. Now, when I spoke with my mom when I was driving home, my neighbor who I had never talked to or like briefly talked to was standing in my driveway waiting for me. And I got out of the car, I was like, Mom, I have to go. I don't really know her. And she told me that she had cancer. And I was like, I just learned this new technique. I don't know what I'm doing. Do you want me to try it on you? Like every step of the way for me has been such a clear path that it's like, I keep looking for roadblocks and they're not there. It's like, you do this and then you do this. It's very clear when I'm in the flow. And I just feel like ever since that first seminar, I've been in the flow. A lot of other MFR therapists, they had trauma before they came, and this helped them with their trauma. And I remember fairly early on going up to Rob, and John was nearby, I believe, and I was like, well, what if you haven't ever had trauma? And Rob just like, that knowing like smile. And so of course it starts to reveal the traumas that I didn't realize or I didn't categorize as trauma. But the thing that I think has really saved me is all of the stuff that came later that I was able to experience with all of the knowledge of MFR. So you mentioned grief. I have gone through tremendous grief, and I don't know how I would have survived without this work. So in 2016, my mother, who is the most amazing soul, the best mom that anyone could ever have, committed suicide. And so I don't know how I would have been able to survive such a grief as that, because it's very complicated. And all of the things that I thought that I knew about suicide before experiencing that, I felt completely different. And just to be able to survive such a devastating blow. And it coincided with the death of my marriage. So I was going through a divorce at the same time. And so it was basically like my entire world just exploded. And again, from that, when your whole foundation is taken away or is no longer there, then you really connect with a foundation that's even more authentic and more pure. And so this work really saved me in many, many, many ways. So I've gone through a significant amount of physical and emotional trauma after learning about this work. So I'm so grateful for that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think some of the chapters that can be devastating are not things that we want to talk about. So I think for you to be vulnerable and be able to say that and say, hey, you worked through this, I think is very admirable. Now, can you take us through that? Because I'm sure other people have had maybe traumas that are similar that are struggling to get to the other side. And, something that you mentioned is like everything falls apart, and that foundation is actually superficial and there's a deeper foundation. How did you find the way to connect with that? Because I would imagine that when things are all falling apart, it just feels like your world is crashing down.
So it's interesting because I think that I got even more centered and more in the like eye of the storm because I had to. And so even though there was all kinds of chaos and there's nothing like living in the moment as when you're dealing with something like that. And so honestly the details, I was able to like really see the people that were there for me. And many of those people are MFR therapists. And so they weren't the people that were like, oh, here's a tissue, or don't cry or don't feel that. They're like, we could talk for days about the details of that. So I'll just give you one example. Mm-hmm. When I got the phone call that my mom had passed, luckily my children were not in my home. My grandma was in my home and she was downstairs, which was very rare. So probably also divine intervention. I got the call and my brother told me to sit down. He didn't have to tell me. He just said, I think he said, where are you and can you sit down? And I just heard these noises coming out of me like, no, and like this crying, like wailing that like I was in it and I was feeling it, but also I was hearing it like it was coming from my soul. And because of the work, I knew, allow this to happen. Just get out of the way and allow it to happen. So I can't imagine if I didn't know this work. Just that one example of shoving down that one scream that needed to come from my soul. That's one example. Mm-hmm. There were so many examples. I just think being present, being in the moment, knowing that it is all going to work out the way that it's supposed to work out. Ironically, prior to everything kind of falling apart, I would help with seminars and I would see Rob would share his story, Donna would share her story, Amy Taylor Johnson, a lot of like physical trauma that they went through and they overcame. And I was like, wow, isn't that interesting that these MFR therapists that are the top of the top had to go through such horrible things, cancer, being run over, car accidents and all the things. And I just had this like knowing of that is how we grow, is these things that might seem like they're horrible. It's a opportunity for us to grow. If everything's good all the time and easy, we're never going to grow. And so I really like felt into that. And then my mom committed suicide and I'm like, no, that's not what I want. Like, I don't want growth in this way. And so like we don't get to control it. But even with that thing that I was like, how can there be good in this? It is the way that it was supposed to be. And so like just the teachings that John has taught us about staying centered, maybe being in it, but also taking in a more expansive view. So get above it and looking down on it, watching for the humor in the situation. It's amazing how when you're going through hell, sometimes there's funny things that happen. And so just being present with whatever it is. It's also like you can never understand other people's pain. You never can understand anyone else's pain. However, when you've gone through something similar, it opens your eyes to be able to help other people with that particular thing potentially.
Absolutely. I think the things that really strike a chord with me are, one, growth comes at the expense of extreme discomfort sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that's what encourages you to grow, because if not, why would you? Mm-hmm. And I think when we talk about grief, the last part of it is this acceptance. And once you're finally able to accept it, you're in that present moment and you have an opportunity to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And, thank you so much for sharing that. And for anyone who maybe has those suicidal thoughts or those experiences, just know that there are people that are here for you. And if you ever need someone, reach out. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we have this fear of being a burden on others. But I think, especially in this myofascial release space, when you're holding space for somebody, it allows them to kind of work through that process on their own. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've gotten out of this myofascial release, is learning what it means to hold space for somebody and having people hold space for me when I'm going through my challenging seasons in life. Now, you had this huge experience, and it's interesting for me to hear you say that. Something that you had mentioned is in your first seminar, you were able to feel somebody else's emotions. Does the term empath mean anything to you?
Well, I know that term is kind of thrown out there a lot, and so I think the way that I see feeling other people's emotions, like, I truly see the fascial system like a web. So if it's like a spider web, and you have all kinds of debris in that web, and the wind is trying to blow through that web, it gets caught, it can't flow through, it gets caught in whatever gunk is in there, right? And so I think that sometimes when you're picking up on other stuff, it's a reflection of whatever is inside of you. And so it's an opportunity for you to go and be with that area and do myofascial release on it to get it to free up so that it can go through you. So, like, I think that being an empath is a good thing. You feel it. What might be a problematic is if you feel it and it's not going through you. So, like, it's just information, and you get to decide, is this mine? Is it yours? Do I want to allow it to go through? Does it just go through me with ease? Somebody can share something that is extremely sad with me, and maybe it doesn't trigger an emotional response in me. Maybe it does. So if it does, usually there's something there that I need to look at. So, like, for example, if I'm working with a patient, I'm not going to start bawling with them. That doesn't mean, like, sometimes tears might come, but that will help me to see, like, oh, there's already something there in me. I don't think it's something to be afraid of. I've seen other therapists that are kind of like, ooh, you're there, I'm here, like, I don't want to touch that. I think, again, maybe it comes from just this innate knowing of, like, I'm protected, I'm okay. Like, I'm not going to carry your stuff. Like, it can come through me.
So I ask because sometimes, especially for the person that I was in PT school, if someone said they were an empath, I was like, what are you talking about? You know? And now that I've become more familiar with this work, you feel things. Now, I think it's important to mention that you do need to be grounded and centered,
Absolutely.
which is a huge principle in John Barnes' teaching. And that's so that you can decipher what's yours and what's not.
Right.
I think people who are not centered and they're just kind of going by whatever pulls them in any direction, if you start feeling emotions, you just automatically freak out, right? But I think it's a mark of a healer. At least this is what I learned from one of my CIs who had Mexican heritage. He said, I've been told that I'm a healer because I can feel other people's pain. And I, as myself, have this experience. It's not like I'm saying, oh man, I have, low back pain. It's like, oh, this isn't mine. And there's a way to be able to know and decipher, just like you've mentioned. I happen to believe that when empaths get together, like in these seminars, we pick up on each other's abilities. And I think John was an empath. I have no way of confirming that. I wasn't close enough with him. But the way that he used that was when he taught on stage and he had someone, and he's very intuitive, he was able to use it as a learning experience, And so I can remember my experiences where he's like, oh, this is channel 3 because I'm just this ball of light, apparently. I don't know. And, my wife had the courage to go on stage at Women's Health, and she had her experience. I'm not going to share about it, but John used it as a teaching moment. And I think it was around the idea of, like, hey, some people are raised being judged their whole lives, and that becomes part of their experience. So can you let those things go? I think when I mention that, it's so that we kind of live on this superficial layer because that's all we see and know. And when your world shatters, you know the truth. And maybe you've always had this inkling, and you're like, I've always felt like I've been protected by God. Not everybody can say that. And you also said you're not religious, but you're spiritual. And what does that mean to you exactly?
So that means that, to me, that my connection with God has nothing to do with any of man's rules or organizations or agendas or motivations.
You got it. So I think that it's common that we see in our society that there's some ulterior motive. There's an agenda that people are trying to push. And that is something that religion has used a lot of. Whereas your spirit is your connection to God. And I think that if your soul is in the direction of your spirit and your spirit's connected to God, that is guiding you to your greatest purpose. And when you went through myofascial release, I'm hearing this, is God here? And you are able to share, hey, he hasn't told me that it's not. And I think you've allowed yourself to have the true experience and letting it happen the way it's going to happen. You know, as I've gotten to know you just in this seminar, you know, there's a little bit of a controlling element. You know?
A little bit.
A+ personality. But one thing that John says is the ultimate form of control is being able to let go of control.
My favorite quote of all of the quotes, yes.
And so that is something that I think if you don't try to force it, it will happen when it's supposed to happen. I think a lot of times, myself included, I get impatient. I want the end result. But it's about that journey that you take along the way. And I'll just say that for myself, like, I have wanted to work out of a rock climbing gym. I met with certain personalities, and it never happened when I was forcing it. But when I finally let it go, there's a climbing gym in Austin, Crux South, that approached me and said, hey, would you like to be the PT here?
Yeah.
And I think that's just a constant reminder for so many things in life that if you're able to let go of control and you're doing the right things for the right reasons, God is going to guide you as long as you trust him. In what ways have you found that it's been hard to trust God, and then the moments where you did trust him and it worked out better than you could have imagined?
What a great question. I think that I don't know that it's been hard to trust him, but I will tell you that after my mom committed suicide, I was not speaking to God for a while. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's not that maybe the trust was gone, but it was like, how could this have happened? But there were just so many lessons within it that he was still there. So one time, I didn't really go into like a woe is me very often, go into the how or the why very often. But I remember one time, it was as I was going through the grieving process and I was sitting at my kitchen table, and I internally in my brain, I was like, how did this happen? Like, why did this happen? And there was my daughter, Melina. I don't remember. She wasn't very old, so maybe 5th or 6th grade. We weren't even watching the show, but a commercial came on, and it was like, who is God? And so she was like, Mommy, who is God to you? And I'm like, oh my gosh, here I'm in this, like, I'm trying to have my one and only, like, mental pity party, and she's asking me a question like that. And I said, well, I'll answer, but you answer first. And she said, I think that we are not supposed to know all the answers. I think that God is supposed to be a mystery, and that we are not supposed to know the how and the why. A child who isn't in my brain doesn't know that I'm thinking how, why, is giving me the answer. That is God. So even in the moment, he was there speaking through her to tell me, you're not supposed to know all the answers.
You know, I think that is just such a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. And children have the most authentic connection to God because they haven't had all these societal pressures and norms projected onto them. And just like in myofascial release, we're not going to know the answers. I know coming from a PT background, I was like, how is this working? Why is this working? And he would say, hey, what's your urgency to know that? You know, versus if you feel it, why can't you just trust that? Mm-hmm. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. But now that is such the way that I try to lead my life, and I know I said try, so that means I'm not doing it as often as I should, but when I sit down, and I love the way you said it, myofascial release teaches you to be still, and when you're still, you can hear God.
So that's what I hear, but that doesn't mean, like, I'm not talking to patients about God.
Sure.
There might be some people that have a very negative connotation. I don't know. This work is not about people's belief systems. Mm-hmm. This is about helping people to be centered and quiet, so whatever information they need can come to them. For me, when I'm centered and quiet, I feel the presence of God, and I feel like I am connected to something way bigger than myself. So, in the seminars, one of the seminars, we do an activity where we make eye contact, and we are not to react, and there's this whole process that we go through. One of the last conversations that I had with John was just sharing with him my gratitude for him and how thankful I am. And I've always tried to always express that to him all of these years. And one thing that I'm always trying to express to him is, like, you don't know how much you've helped other people, because you don't know how many people I have been able to help because of this work. And so there's no way, I'm just one of all of these therapists, and you don't know all of the stories of all of the lives that have been touched. I don't know all of the stories. So in Fascial Pelvis, one of the other instructors said something when she introduced herself about how I had a very meaningful impact on her life. She said, I changed her life. And I was like, oh, wow. I don't walk around knowing that. Mm-hmm. And so I told John, within every lesson, sometimes he'll teach us one lesson, and it is just the pivot point for such greatness that can't be explained, or we can't verbalize the impact that he has had. Mm-hmm. And so one of my last conversations with him, I expressed to him how during that seminar where we go eye to eye, and I have done it so many times, taken the class, assisted the class, and the information that you get and all the things that you go through. So you'll have to take the class to know the details. So recently, a year ago, I'm really bad with time.
It's okay.
My best friend that I have known since I was 5 years old, that is more than a friend to me, she was going through something that I did not know that resulted in her being put in the hospital. And I got the call where I thought that she was going to die. And so I went into all of the things, and then she was in a different city. So I had to get to her. And so for a month, I would think she was going to die. I would go there, then she would be okay, and then I would go back home, and then I would think she was going to die, and I would go there. She ended up being put on life support. We ended up having to make the decision to take her off of life support. I was there at the moment that she died. I was part of the decision to take her off of life support. And when I won't, it's too long of a story, but there was a moment before she passed where she opened her eyes, and I was able to look in her eyes. And the information that we were able to transfer to each other, just pure love, before she passed, if I had learned just that one thing from John, what an amazing gift for me to be able to express to my best friend how much I loved her. And the only reason I was able to do that is because of all of the years of practicing keeping eye contact. Because I did notice sometimes in certain situations, people are not able to maintain eye contact. And so it's not like he's teaching you how to maintain eye contact or how to communicate something, but that is just one very pivot point, life-changing experience that I don't know if I would have had if it wasn't for this work. And that's just one little drop in the ocean of all the lessons that he taught me that I will forever be grateful for. Staying present for that one moment, and then staying present for all of the moments as she left her physical body. It was the most heartbreaking beautiful, miraculous experience that I have ever had. And I am grateful for all of the lessons of being present, even when the worst thing that you could ever imagine is happening.
You know, you said so much, and these are huge experiences that are seemingly subtle, and I think that's part of it. You know, something that we learn in subtle energy is you have an influence and impact on everybody you interact with, and they have an influence and an impact on you. And so even though you might feel busy in the moment because you have to do all the things, if you can take a step back and realize you're actually part of something bigger, and then try to take a view from that perspective, you learn that things are just happening without you recognizing that. And so John has had a huge influence on my life, you know, just making things go with more ease and just being able to be comfortable making it easy, you know, all these things that go counterproductive to what society says, or it's like it's a grind, you have to work really hard. And sure, there are things that you're going to have to put effort and energy into, and it is going to be building something, but it shouldn't have to be like that all the time. And I think that's the message that we get told a lot. You know, you are sharing these huge moments and these lessons that you're speaking about being present, because really this is all we have. Sometimes we get stuck in our head and ruminate on the past or have thoughts about the future, but you only have this one present moment. What lessons have you learned from just being present?
Oh my goodness, so many. That is such a hard question because there's a lesson in every moment that I'm present in. And so like the even during class when Joan would give information or in any class, there's just too many lessons that I've learned. So I think that being present is all about knowing that whatever is coming your way that you can handle, whether it is the most amazingly good thing or something that is extremely challenging. I don't know if this really answers your question, but I think that because I've been through so many hard things, and those are just a few, I think that life sometimes is like a pendulum. And so like the more that when I make it through something that is unimaginable to make it through, then the most unimaginable amazing things also happen. And so if I am not present with the things that are difficult or hard or heartbreaking, then I probably am not going to be present with the things that are unimaginably good. You know, you might miss it. You might be like, I'm not worthy, or I can't take this in because it's too good. But if you learn to take in the good, maybe you also can learn to take in the things that aren't so good. And isn't that why we're here? Is to take it all in and to learn from it and to help each other so that they can learn from it or just be present. So just with suicide, then heartbreakingly, my son had a very good friend that committed suicide at a very young age. And I was like, baby, what do you want to do? Like, we've been through this in our own experience. Should we go support this other family? And he was like, absolutely. And I said, so basically we went and we offered our support, and just, I didn't know if the door would even be open to us. I didn't know these people at all. They are the most loving, heartfelt, just wonderful people that went through a very, very hard thing, that we were able to say, we also went through a very, very hard thing and we're still alive. And we're still doing, you know, we're actually thriving. And so I think that is a very tangible example of taking something that was horrific that happened to us. Not that we can say, oh, we understand anybody that's dealt with suicide. No, because you can only understand what your level of understanding, but maybe to give hope to other people, like, keep walking. Like, I see that you're going through hell. I also have gone through hell, but I kept walking and I'm on the other side.
You know, something that comes to mind for me is I firmly believe that we are put on this earth to go through these experiences, these negative experiences. And because if you go through it, you learn the tools on how to overcome it. And then you have the tools to help somebody else who's going through the same situation. the way John would say it is, you can only take someone as far as you've gone. And so I'm hearing this story that you're able to help others through your pains, really. And I think that's part of what we do. And, it's so amazing to hear that, for me, when I think about having these big moments, it's like life would be a drag, but you're just keep on walking. In those moments when it's feeling heavy, like, what guidance do you have?
So I'm really just staying with it and looking for the lesson, or looking for the lesson, maybe so I don't have to go through it again and look for another, so I don't have to learn the same lesson again. So another example is I herniated my disc in my back. And so that was like the most physical pain that I had ever been through. And within that, so I'm not saying, oh, it's great to go through horrible things. It is not great. It feels horrible. But within it, a part of me was like, wow, this is fascinating. I can't do anything that I used to be able to do. Let's sit with that. Like, I'm able to feel, when my patients say it feels like a live wire of fire, now I know what that feels like. Or when they say it takes me 3 hours to get ready to be able to get to your clinic, now I know what that means. Like, there are all of the things that I could not have learned from a textbook or any other way. I just had to feel it.
Yeah, I think John says that not everyone has that, but he says it's super valuable for someone to have this excruciating pain so that they know and can empathize with who they're working with. Because then it's not just the textbook answer. It's like you have no idea what it feels like to have this searing pain shoot down your leg. I can't just say, just do these back extensions and you'll be fine. And when you go through those things, of course, it is miserable at times, but those are the real emotions that our patients are feeling. And so I just love that you're so easily able to feel through it. I think people avoid it. And again, part of what we learned here is, hey, you have to feel it to heal it. And then when you go through it, now it's like, hey, I know what someone else is dealing with, and I can empathize and truly be there and just listen to them sometimes. I think sometimes holding space is just sitting in the mud with somebody. You don't want to just have to fix them. They're not asking to be fixed, but they're just struggling, and it's okay to be there sometimes. Whereas I think sometimes people say, hey, do this so you don't have to think about it. And it's the people who are like, hey, I know it's tough, let it just be tough. And then that allows you to kind of be in that moment, facilitate and process what you need to process, ultimately to move forward. And then for you, I just love hearing it's like, I learned something. I think sometimes when you're caught in this channel 5, it's like these horrible things happen to me, you get caught up in the story. But the channel 3 is like, but what was the lesson that I learned? What did I learn about it for myself, and what did I learn it so that I can help others? And I can just say, not knowing you for very long, I can see that is a huge focal point that you're able to do and embody that not many people are able to do. I think sometimes people get stuck in the pity party and say, hey, woe is me, and that doesn't help anybody,
But I will say, so with the death of my mother, I did have someone say to me, oh, well, you'll be able to help others. Well, when it was acute, when the pain was acute, I was not in the space of helping others. And because of my personality or my PT, I didn't want to be in the middle of it. I wanted to be on the other side so that I could help others. But the key to getting there was to feel myself in it and be in it and soak up all of the information of in it, in the discomfort, in the place that I didn't want to be, instead of like trying to quickly get through it. I needed to feel fully all of the things that I needed to feel so that I could get through it.
Something that we got reminded of in Fascial Pelvis is first look at the big picture and then look at the detail. And I think your belief in God is the big picture, and then these struggling moments are the details. And you're able to kind of return back and recognize the big picture. And again, you sit in it for as long as you need to learn the lesson. if you fail to learn the lesson, it's just going to keep popping up. If someone is struggling with back pain, they don't do anything, they're not learning the lesson, that back pain usually gets worse. And so it's just a reminder to think big picture, which is John's channel 3, and then focus in on the details, which is channel 5. If you lead from your heart, or channel 3, then channel 5 facilitates and works for you. But if you lead with channel 5, often it's very fear-based and it doesn't lead you to where you need to be. Another analogy is John used to teach the eagle and the hawk. Eagle is big picture. It can notice little patterns and then it goes towards it, versus the hawk is just really focused on one thing. You need to have both.
I think also I am just so lucky. For whatever reason, I found this work. And then early on in my career, I did my SES with Rob at Therapy on the Rocks, and then I worked for Rob at Therapy on the Rocks. So I was there, unfortunately, only for a year for things that had nothing to do with MFR, but obviously was the path. Like when I moved there, I was planning to be there forever. But it's different than like taking a seminar once a year, once every 6 months. I worked under Rob and with Joan for that whole year. So I soaked up all of the information of their presence from them and from John and from Donna. And then all of the classes that I've taken, all of the classes that I've assisted, over and over and over, being taught to stay present, all of the things that we learn. I just feel like I was so lucky. Like I had such an amazing and have such an amazing education with this work. So for one example, after my mom committed suicide, someone very, very close to me said, "You didn't fix her." That could have been devastating to me. But I had already spent all of these years being taught I don't fix anybody. So that one thing could have saved my life, just being taught over and over. Because, as a PT, we want to fix. Yeah. We want to get in there, we want to fix it, and then, the sooner we fix it, the better. I had to have John tell me over and over and over and over, you don't fix in every seminar. Maybe he wasn't talking to me. Maybe he was talking to somebody else, but it was the tissue memory of that phrase was so solid in me that when someone said, "You didn't fix her," it bounced off me because I was like, no, that was not my job. I don't fix anyone. But I can't imagine if I didn't have all of those repetitions to go through an experience like that and have someone say something like that to me, how devastating that would be. So how amazing is that?
That's huge, because someone projected onto you this guilt or this shame, and it wasn't you. Right. And that would totally change the trajectory of how you handle things or saw the world. I love that. Now, you are kind of embodied in this myofascial release space. At what point did you decide, okay, I'm ready to take it off on my own and start my own thing?
So ironically, my memory obviously is not very good, because I didn't realize this until I had a feeling you were probably going to ask me details about the journey. And I am terrible about dates and times. I barely know my own birthday, let alone my anniversary. Don't tell my husband. So I actually went back and pulled up the resume that I submitted to Therapy on the Rocks to be employed there. And I didn't realize, so I did the paperwork for my practice in 2005 when right after my daughter was born, because so that was before I learned MFR. I didn't take my first MFR class until 2008. February of 2008, I just found out. And I forgot that. So I had already done the business paperwork prior to ever finding this. It's like I created the path before the path revealed itself to me, which I forgot that had happened. So I think what happened was I've got my PT brain, and I'm like, I want to be a stay-at-home mom during this time that they're little, but then I'm going to start my own practice. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm going to go ahead and do the paperwork. And then I ended up, I was doing part-time work for other people. And then I went and did the classes, found my purpose, came back and was like, okay, that's the thing that I needed, got my practice going. And then I think I was only practicing for like a year. So I rented space out of my best friend's husband is a chiropractor. He rented a room to me. And then I was there for, I believe, a year. Went and worked at Therapy on the Rocks in 2010. And then ended up only being able to stay for a year. Came back, went to a different, smaller location. And then this whole time I've been helping with seminars. So whenever I could, I'm helping John, helping Rob, helping Donna, anybody that wants me to help. and taking seminars. And then, so just recently, so it was after my best friend passed. I came back to the clinic that I was renting space from, and I noticed the building next to our building had these numbers. Now, I don't even barely know my own phone number. I don't know my children's phone number or my husband's phone number because everything's, that's not good. But those 4 numbers were the numbers in my best friend's phone number when we were children. So it's ingrained in my brain, right? And I was like, that's kind of weird. And then it just created this, and then I was like, what building is that? That looks like it's empty. I wonder if they're selling it. Like, maybe I should look. And then went through this whole process thinking that I might buy the building that I was in, almost did, and then just had this like, this just doesn't feel right for me. Even though it was a really, really good situation, it just didn't feel right. And then I went, and as soon as I made the decision no, then I was sleeping better, and like I just felt like this weight was lifted off me. Then I went and was helping with a course that Peter was taking, and it came up in conversation, and he was like, if they were going to sell, you really need to look for another place. They're probably going to sell whatever. And I was like, Peter, why are you putting that out there? Like, I'm not ready right now. And so, of course, thanks a lot, Peter, when I went back, like literally that Monday I went back to work, then it became apparent to me that they were looking to sell my place. So I was like, oh, I need to go find another place. And so the way that I talk to God is more like a conversation. I was like, hey, I'm busy. I really need help. I'm bad at making decisions. Like, just make this clear. Just make it clear. And then my best friend that died is Molly. I was like, Molly, I don't know what you're doing on the other side, but you're not really helping me. So why don't you like step up your game and help me? And so I went and looked at 2 other places. One place was small and very affordable, but I was like, I just got this thought, like, I can make this work. And then this thought was like, I can make anything work. That doesn't mean that that's the place. Okay. Just because you can make it work doesn't mean that it's the place. And then I saw some damage on the floor, and I was like, if there's any chance that there's any kind of water damage, forget it. I don't want this. Then I went to look at this other location, and it was perfect. It was so perfect. I was like, there's no way I could ever afford this. And I was like, that's too bad, because this is the spot. Like, I know in my gut, like, this is the spot, but there's no way I can afford it. And so then I went back and I figured out the numbers and I found a way to afford it. And I was like, this is it. But I think I was still like, I made the decision, like, this is it, but I'm not for sure how it's going to be it. But I still was like, show me a sign, or like I wanted some kind of confirmation. And then I went to work. So nobody knows that I'm even looking, right? My office manager is never gone. She was gone. I never sit at the front desk because she's never gone. I had a day that I was having to help check people in, take payment, scheduling, and treat. And so I think it was the first patient, she came and she gave me this bright orange Phoenix Mercury t-shirt. And I was like, that's so nice. I said, did you know that my best friend that passed played for the Phoenix Mercury? And she was like, yeah, that's why I brought it for you. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so sweet. And then I set it aside. And then I went back to treating. So it was like, this is why I'm so direct with God, because I'm a little slow. So like 4 patients later, I'm treating this patient, and I got this very strong visual of like a hummingbird. And I'm like, shoot, okay. And then I'm treating other things, and then I get this visual of a hummingbird again. And it was a patient that I knew she wasn't going to think that I'm totally weird if I said this. And so I was like, hey, I don't know if this means anything to you, but I keep seeing a hummingbird. And she was like, oh my gosh, I keep seeing an orange swirl And I was like, okay. And she goes, what was your friend's name? And I was like, what? And she goes, your friend that passed, it was Molly, right? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, Molly's here. And she's co-treating and she's having a blast. And I was like, what? And so I was like, okay, this person must be extremely intuitive and she must like get information from the other side, I'm guessing. But like, I don't want this to be about me. This is her session. She's here for her. And so I said, thank you for the information, but I just want this to be about you. And she said, no problem. But does the number 25 mean anything to you? And I was like, I'm not sure. Again, like, let's make this about you. So we both quieted down, stayed with the process. Afterwards, so the night before all of this happened, when I was like envisioning, like, is this the space? I had this vision of like doing this grand opening, and Sequoia, my office manager, plays the sound bowls for like the vibration, and we add it with some of our classes and stuff, and it's delicious. But I was thinking, okay, well, I'll have her do that at the grand opening. And then I was like, I don't want her to be stuck doing that for hours. I wonder if other people would help us. And I was thinking of this person that also does sound bowls and this other person that does it. I was like, maybe I'll ask them if they would be willing to do it. Okay, so back to the next day, I'm treating this patient. She gets this intuitive information. And then I sit at the desk and I'm talking to her about scheduling and stuff. And I said, I want you to know how grateful I am that the information came up. I just didn't want it to be a part of your session, but I am very grateful to you. And she said, no problem. She goes, she goes, I was seeing this like white brick archway and the number 25. Does that mean anything to you? Well, I grew up with my best friend. And then we, when you're a kid, you might make plans to go to college. We actually went to college together. We lived together at college. And we lived in an apartment that had this archway that you would walk through that was white brick. And then I remembered her birthday. I would always forget her birthday every single year. And I would call her on her birthday, not knowing it was her birthday, every single year. It was the 25th. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And so I just started like tears because I'm like, that's my confirmation. And we said that orange squirrel. I was like, I got this bright orange shirt this morning. She's trying to send me messages of like, yes, that's the confirmation is what I heard. That patient said to me, this work has been so life-changing for me, and I really want to do something to give back. And I play the bowls, and I keep inviting you to come to my location, and I know you're super busy. I was wondering if I could come and play the bowls for you in your location. No one knew anything. They didn't know I was looking at a different location. She just thought she'd bring it to me. So I just thought that is further confirmation. Like, it's so specific. How could that ever happen any other way than to be an answer to me to a prayer of like, this is the way. I also very strongly heard my best friend say, like, what are you afraid of? Go big or go small. Go big or go home. Like, just do it. And so I decided to go ahead and get this space. I was so lucky that I was actually able, the realtor had like a drone that flew through the space. So one of my last encounters with John is I was able to express to him how grateful I am and how by following his guidance, I was able to get to places that I never could have imagined. And one of the places was to be able to have this most amazing space. And I was able to show him the space. So he got to watch that drone fly through my office. And so he knew the dream that I was able to make reality because of him and this work.
That's so beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of times when we're trying to build practices and we move into new spaces, there's all these decisions to make. Mm-hmm. And I think you're able to stave off this impulsivity that a lot of us will feel like, oh, we got to make a decision, pounce now, strike while the iron's hot. And while that might be okay in certain situations, a big decision like this is going to take some time. And you just kind of allowed the universe or God or whomever you want to call it to speak to you. Mm-hmm. If someone's going through that, like myself, and I'm like, there's a space, it's nice, I can make it work. And it's totally valid, but it's not the place where I'm like, How do you make those decisions?
Well, because prior to that, I was looking at a space that could have worked, and I was given some opportunities that were amazing. Like the person that was selling it was the person that owned the building. She's going to give me a great deal on it. She's a very loving, supportive person. It just, I don't know. It just, there was a lot of like angst in the decision. And I want to be doing this work for a really, really long time. For 100 years, like Joan. And I wanted a place that maybe was closer to my home. Like, I don't know, it's balancing the channel 5 and channel 3. So like you have all the like analytical, like I wasn't sure if I could afford it. I got to sit down and do the work and look at the numbers and see. It's not just like, ooh, this is beautiful, let's do it. You know what I mean? So I think that just like being present with whatever the feelings are that are coming up, and I ask for guidance, and then I quiet down and listen to see what the guidance is. And sometimes I listen and sometimes I don't. And so this time I did, and I don't know what the future holds. It is a much bigger space than I need. So sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, like I got into this bigger space than I need. But because this came from something to me was bigger than me, to me, it doesn't even feel like it's truly only my space. I feel like I'm the steward of the space. So it's my job to manage the space, take really good care of the space. Like it is a place that I get to decide everything about the space. And so because of that, it's very, very important to me that it is held, it's like a container, and I decide what comes in and what doesn't come in, and the energy around it, I get to choose, you know. And then we did the grand opening, and like Rob came, June came, Amy Taylor Johnson was a little bit peer pressured by me, came, like all of these people, all these patients, family, all these people that I wasn't expecting. So like I just feel like I'm just so lucky, and I have all of this love and guidance and people that know how to hold space and know how to just pour love into a space, and this is the container for something bigger than all of us. And so it happens all the time. The patients that come to my space, I wouldn't be able to help without this work. And I never know. I don't know if, you know, depending on what they come to me with, if I'm going to be able to help them. And now because I have a lot more experience, maybe this is why, I don't know, I get very complicated cases. And so I'm always like, let's give it a try. And so the complications of the cases tend to get a little more complicated, and I get to see, to me the word is miracles. I get to be a part of miracles all the time. When I worked at Therapy on the Rocks, we would have such miraculous stories of transfer healing, to the point that me and Rob and June would be doing our notes, and somebody would pop in, oh, so-and-so doesn't have this anymore, and I just was kind of laughing, because it's like in any other situation, that would be time to like not take, like pause with what you're doing and be like, oh my gosh, are you serious? But it was so commonplace because we got to see miracles all the time. And I feel like that's the same with my practice now, that I am able to bear witness to the most amazing changes, because the people that come to me, you know, sometimes they're not all super complicated necessarily, or that we know, but the people that come to me are a very special people that usually seek me out, and they are ready to get into it. You know, they're ready to peel back the layers and really go after what is the cause. And I'm just so lucky. I love my life, and I love this work, and I'm just so lucky and grateful to have it.
That's awesome. You know, I think for me, a miracle is simply when you are looking at something instead of through a lens of fear, that you're able to look at it through a lens of love. And that's all it is. Now, you know, you have this new space, lots of room. She's hiring, by the way.
I'm always hiring, but I'm super, super picky.
So if you're looking for experience,
yes,
make sure you reach out to her. She's in the Phoenix area. How does someone work with you?
So you have to have experience with myofascial release. and contact me and let me know. Send me a resume. So on my website, there's a place that you can send me an application and a resume, and then we can talk and see. But because people do come to me for myofascial release, I have to have a certain level of skill. And so it just depends, you know what I mean? You could be a therapist that has taken every class a million times and you might just not get it. And those therapists that don't get it, it's usually because they come into a class with an agenda or maybe a fear of being vulnerable enough to listen to what John was teaching. So it could be someone, you might just take one class and you might be exceptional at this work, or you could take all of the classes in the world and not be so exceptional. And so if you come to me and you interview with me and you're not exceptional, I'm going to tell you, go do an SES with Rob or go take more classes and then come back. So there's nothing lost. It's just like checking to see where you are in your journey and if it's a right fit.
Perfect. And if someone were looking for myofascial release treatment, how might they work with you?
Okay, so I did because I'm kind of all or nothing. So I figured, if I'm changing the location, let's also change the name. So for the longest time, when I started my practice, I named it Self-Solace Physical Therapy, which is kind of a tongue tie. And also I had no idea how many people can't say the word solace, and that they say soulless, and that is very opposite of the message that I want to send. And so I was like, hey, you know what? This is the time, now or never. So I changed it to Swan Physical Therapy and Myofascial Release. So if you Google Swan PT and MFR or Swan Physical Therapy and Myofascial Release, even if you Google my old name, it'll all redirect you back to my website. So all the information is there.
Perfect. And she's in the Phoenix area, her and Peter. Shout out Peter Podbielski. And so is there anything that you want to share with the audience that you feel like hasn't been covered? I love that you're mentioning the important lesson of being present. I think if there's anything that someone takes away from this particular episode, it's being present and feeling what's in the present moment. Is there any last thing you'd like to share with the audience?
I don't think so. I think I pretty much said it all. Yeah, so I guess being present for whatever, like being present, being centered, and if you're not sure how to do that, go take the seminars, and you have the most amazing therapist there guiding you. Go take the seminars to learn presence.
Excellent. Last question is, I know that you and your husband go to NBA basketball games. Right now, it's the finals of the NBA. It's the Spurs versus Oklahoma City Thunder. Shout out Spurs. I'm a huge basketball fan from my days playing fantasy basketball. Shout out Johto League. Who do you have winning the NBA Finals?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's hilarious. I noticed that he was wearing the jersey. I can't say the name.
Wembanyama.
That is my husband's favorite player. My husband is French, and so of course we would have to support him.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, learn more about how I can help at www.myofascial.health/website.